Hello, my dear friends. Welcome back to another edition of Love, Service, Wisdom with myself, Marissa Rada Wepener. You can call me Rada as your host. And today's conversation is with Jeff Kober, who is one of my very first meditation teachers and someone who I have received daily Vedic meditation thoughts in my email inbox, literally for the past 11 years every day, and it's inspired me immensely. And now he's just published Embracing Bliss that touches on these Vedic meditation thoughts for the day. And then as a companion to the book, there's the Embracing Bliss podcast that's now out with him as the host and author and speaker and brilliant mind behind it all. Or maybe the book is a companion to the podcast. Either way, both are out now. Embracing Bliss, the book, where you can get at any online bookstore, and then the podcast on any of the streaming platforms. Like I said, it touches on his Vedic meditation thoughts for the day, which I have enjoyed so much. I think he's been doing them now for 11 years. Every day I get these in my inbox. And oftentimes I use them not only to inspire myself, but to inspire my teaching, especially when I was teaching a lot at my yoga studio, Sage Yoga and Wellness. I would often, or every now and then I should say, bring in what I had received from Jeff and read it to the class and use that kind of as my Dharma talk launching point. They're so good. If you want these thoughts from the day from Jeff, like I get them, just go to Jeff Kober, and that's KOBER.com, Jeff-Kober, Jeff- Kober.com. And if you hit the meditation tab at the top, you can go down to daily thoughts and you can subscribe to get these in your inbox as well. And just to give you a little sampling of what these Vedic meditation thoughts for the day are, or what you might find in the Embracing Bliss podcast or the Embracing Bliss book, I'm going to read you the one that I got today. So the day that I'm reading this and recording this is August 5th. So August 5th, 2022. This came in my inbox today. The title is Change is Inevitable. Certain indeed is death for the born, and certain is birth for the dead. Therefore, over the inevitable, you should not grieve. From the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 27. Change is inevitable in the field of relative existence. It is going on even in the present, as it was in the past and will be in the future. The phenomenon of birth and death is an expression of the eternal process of evolution, which in its turn expresses the purpose of creation. Life evolves with a view of the realization of perfection. Development through change is the natural course of the cosmic process. Man has freedom of action. Thereby, he can adapt any channel, good or bad, through which he wants the course of his life to flow. This is in his hands, but change is inevitable, and it is for the sake of life that this is so. So that all was from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, his translation and commentary on the Bhagavad Gita from chapters 1 through 6. And so that starts out the thought for the day. And then Jeff gives his 2 cents and interpretation to make it applicable to our lives, which I love so much. So Jeff says, there are 2 demands within each of us, always. The demand of the ego, animal nature, for safety and comfort, and the demand of spirit for our growth and evolution. These conflicting demands play out by way of the ego mind saying no to the new, and the spirit self saying yes to the flow of evolution through us. Ego wants to find the perfect picture of life, money, safety, love, family, and then freeze it. This is its nature. Spirit, on the other hand, wants only your growth and development, continual movement towards the fullest experience of life possible. Life keeps happening in spite of our best efforts to stop its flow. And if we are trying to stop it, we inevitably get bruised. Nothing stays the same in the relative world ever. My thoughts and feelings are completely different now than they were when I began writing this 15 minutes ago, and they will be different again by the time I reach the end. To decide how I want them to be and then try to make them stay that way is absurd. This goes double for anyone I think should be a certain way. They will never cooperate, except in moments here or there, and I will be miserable. Our task is to become identified with the self within, the place of no change that is there in each of us. This place that once embraced gives us the ground to stand on to allow the flow of ever-changing life to wash over us without being at the effect of it. This is the gift we receive in meditation, guided by our own practice to that place of pure being within, transcendent of the relative world, and then lifted back into life with an opportunity at each moment to choose which demand we will follow, to stay small for the ego or to expand for the spirit. And so that's Jeff with his thought for the day, interpretation of the opening Dharma text quote. And then it always ends with this prompt at the end of the thought for the day. Today I will meditate twice and remind myself throughout the day to take my attention from the demanding voice of the ego, that I may hear the guidance of the quiet voice of nature that awaits me within. And then there's a beautiful photo that Jeff puts at the end because he's a great photographer too. So that's the thought for the day, the Vedic meditation thought for the day that Jeff pretty much does every day and has been for 11 years. And these are touched upon in his book, Embracing Bliss, and his podcast, Embracing Bliss. And I think you'll love this conversation between the two of us, reconnecting after all these years from his time when he came to Montana in the middle of nowhere to train myself and my mom and a few of our other students in this lineage of Vedic meditation. So enjoy this podcast and then let's see what else is going on. Right now I'm in Boise. I'm loving summer. I'm in the middle of some gardening and home projects, which thrill me beyond belief, the level of joy that I get from getting projects done at the house or working on the garden. So doing this for the next couple of weeks before we get back on the road, Krishna and I, East Forest and I, we have got a private ceremony in upstate New York. And then we head down to the summer mountain retreat called Love and Reason. That is a intersection of Bhakti and Buddhism. A lot of the talks and speakers are either going to be in the Bhakti realm or the Buddhist realm from August 25th through 29th. It's the Love, Serve, Remember Foundation Sangha down there, with every night Krishna Das and his band performing kirtan, and Bob Thurman will be there, and Sharon Salzberg and Spring Washam, Shantala will be there. They're going to perform live for my yoga classes in the morning, as well as East Forest, which I'm really thrilled about. And if you're planning on coming to this retreat, I'll just give you a warning ahead of time. If you haven't yet been to a Love, Serve, Remember Foundation event or workshop or experience, they're really obsessed with the Hanuman Chalisa. And I, in all my years of yogic everything, this or that, all over the place, had not heard the Chalisa until I went to my first Ram Dass retreat in Maui in 2018. And it was one of my second experiences with Ram Dass, and we were at the resort, and it was in the afternoon, the day of the first workshop, and Ram Dass was in the hot tub, and Rachel was there, and some of his caregivers were there. Duncan Trussell was there. I was there with Krishna. There was maybe like 10 to 12 people in this hot tub, and Ram Dass and the closer Sangha, because that was our first time there. We were definitely, Krishna and I, like flies on the wall a little bit. They were Skyping somebody that was a friend. And all of a sudden, everyone in the hot tub, besides Krishna and myself, and maybe Duncan too, started chanting something in Sanskrit that went on forever. And it wasn't like a repetitive Sri Ram, Jai Jai Ram, or Hare Krishna repetition of something. It was something that was tons of verses. Each line was different and it was lengthy. And I was like, what is this? What is this that everybody can just like gleefully drop into and know? It seems hard. What is happening here? So I was enthralled and intrigued. And then that night, Krishna Das was chanting, began the kirtan, and it's the Chalisa, the Hanuman Chalisa. And fortunately, when you check in, they give you 2 pieces of paper. Each side is printed on, so 4 pages basically, with the words and the translation. So you have it written down and you can join in if you don't know it, which is what I tried to do, but just kind of like mumbling and bumbling along, slurring my words and trying to catch up and getting lost and just basically, not doing it well. Let's say that for sure, but wanting to figure it out. So trying while everybody around me could do this thing. So you kind of get this feeling of like, I want to be able to do this really hard bhakti thing as well, because you guys learned it, so it must be possible for me to learn it too. And so when I got home from that, I dedicated myself to learning it, where I had that same piece of paper I got from the retreat. And I would sit down and listen to Nina Rao's Nina Chalisa, that's on The Flow of Grace, one of Krishna Das's album. And I would listen to Nina sing and chant, and I would just do 1 line every day. And the next day I would try to learn another line, adding in the lines I had tried the days before, and now I've got it. Now I can sing it. Now I can sing it and play it on harmonium. And I still have that original piece of paper that I got when I was on that retreat. And I used it so much, and it traveled with me, and I folded it and it's torn and its corners are bent. And you know how when you have a piece of paper that it sees a lot of touch, it gets soft. Both of these pieces of paper are like super soft and delicate. And it's one of my treasured things now, these 2 sheets of the Chalisa that I learned from the first time. So that's all to say, if you're coming to this retreat for the first time, one of these experiences, maybe already start to prep yourself on learning the Hanuman Chalisa, or at least, this is fair warning that a lot of that chanting will be going on, and it's hugely wonderful, and I love it so much, and I look forward to you loving it as much as I do once you learn it too, or maybe just even once you get to hear it, especially in a group of hundreds who are like just totally dropped into the bhakti heart of it all. And with that, my dear ones, that little story, I'm going to turn you over to this conversation with Jeff Kober. Jeff Kober, who I often refer to as my meditation teacher. It's so great to have you here on Love, Service, Wisdom.
Well, just the title alone kind of says it all, doesn't it? Love, Service, Wisdom.
They're the 3 most important things for me, or they're buckets for the things that are important to me.
Yeah, you can use them as an organizing principle for just about everything. Yeah.
We've known each other for quite some time. You were just going to share what?
We met 15 years ago last month, and I remember specifically because you were in the very first meditation course I ever taught, which was in Montana. What was that little town?
Sheridan. Right next to Twin Bridges.
Twin Bridges, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
So in Sheridan, and we taught, we had the course at your mother's yoga studio, which was a converted barn.
Mm-hmm.
I had just finished my intensive 3-month residential course to become a teacher of Vedic meditation. And I remember you and your mother, and there was I also remember there was a Vietnam veteran who
was it
the
Norm?
very first. I think it was. And
Yeah.
he's since passed. And he was the very first person I taught. And
Or
in the
maybe it was
teaching,
Bill, actually, Bill Scruggs. I wonder.
Bill Scruggs, he was
Maybe.
bearded,
Mm-hmm.
older.
Mm-hmm.
But in the middle of the ceremony I did before I taught him, the smoke from the camphor set off the smoke alarm above us. And he was a Vietnam veteran. He literally dove under the table.
Oh my gosh. So your very first initiates into the Vedic
Yeah,
tradition, you made dive under a
I,
table.
I made him dive under a table, and it's the good news is it's only been uphill from there. So
Oh, 15 years ago. That's some great context
yeah.
for me to think that that was 15 years ago. I was living in Sheridan, Montana with my mom, my family, and we had
Hmm.
opened the studio together. And your sister lives nearby, right? In
She did.
Montana.
Yeah,
She used to.
yeah. She used to. Yeah,
And that's what
yeah.
brought you out. Was she a student of ours? She must have been.
She was, and I had. Here's the actual story. So I'm an actor, and I had been working with my meditation teacher, and he said, "Well, it's time for you to become a teacher." I said, "No, man, I'm an actor. I don't want to be a teacher." And he said, "Well, you can do both." And I said, "Yeah, sure." And then I said, "So in the middle of this 3.5 month process of becoming a teacher, I said, so in Flagstaff, I said, so when do I start planning what I do when I get out of here?" He said, "Don't, just let it happen." And I was like, "Yeah, right." And he said, "No, no, really, just let it happen." And a few months before we ended, I called my sister and we got on the phone and she burst into tears. She
Mm.
was having a hard time. I said, "Oh, you need to learn to meditate. I'm coming to Montana." She said, "Oh, sure you are." I said, "No, find a yoga studio near you." She says, "Well, I actually know one." So she got in touch with you. We set up the intro talk, and I came up there to teach meditation and then taught another course in Billings, a little further east in
Mhm.
Montana. And I bring up the acting and the wanting to be an actor rather than a meditation teacher. And my teacher saying you can do both, because the day that I taught you to meditate, I got a call from my manager saying, "You're being offered a Western." It starts shooting the day after I would finish the course in Billings.
Mm.
So it was like it could not have been more profoundly perfect to
Mm.
show me that both realities could exist in one life.
I love it. I'm getting chills. That's so beautiful. That's so
Yeah, it really
beautiful.
was.
Yeah. And so your tradition, Vedic meditation, explain that for those that don't know and tell us about your teacher too.
Vedic meditation it means of the Veda, and the Veda is as the title of your podcast says, wisdom. Veda means knowledge or wisdom, and the Veda speaks of itself as being the science of consciousness, and that truth, knowledge exists within consciousness, and indeed everything exists within consciousness, and indeed everything is consciousness. So if you want to change your experience of the world, you must change your consciousness. It's not that you change your experience and then your consciousness changes. It's that you change your consciousness and then your experience changes. Vedic meditation is a way of transcending the level of consciousness where all of your problems reside to get to the level of consciousness where a problem is not even a thing, where a process is the only thing happening. And once you can get aligned with process and truth, which in Vedic terms means it's capital T, truth, that which never changes. Once you get in touch with that, then the passing problems of a life, of a day, of a relationship become just that, just like Pema Chodron says, that you are the sky, all the rest is just the weather. That's the weather. What's, is it raining today? Is it clear? Is it, cloudy? What is it? But what I am never changes. And as I And so the meditation really works, because if you begin to know the truth of what you are, then the weather becomes an adventure rather than an oh no.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And all other sorts of things also occur when you do the meditation, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
You begin to let go of the structured uh, patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior. You find new access to the biochemistry and the attitude of bliss or happiness. And you find yourself more able to offer yourself to the world, because you're getting fulfilled within, and you're not having to get things from others.
Exactly. Yeah. And this practice specifically, it's similar to TM, those that know TM, Transcendental Meditation.
They are sister or brother techniques. Absolutely. Yeah.
Where
And
you,
the point of both of them, or either of them, is that the part of us that we are transcending is the part of us that is in control, which is the part of us that continues to give us a sameness of experience and makes it so bloody challenging to change. And so transcending that, you get in touch with the truth of what you are, which is all about the change that wants to happen through you.
tell me more about the sameness of experience that it's
Well,
trying to have.
Well, as I understand it, just to speak to a model that some people may have studied, when they first began to do fMRIs with people under the influence of psilocybin, they anticipated seeing the brain lit up in ways that it wasn't lit up before. But in fact, they found it darkened in areas where it was usually lit up. And that place where it was darkened was the default mode network, which is, in survival terms, it causes us to ignore what is not potentially dangerous.
Yes.
Because it's just going to be the same thing, and so don't worry about it. In survival terms, that's kind of brilliant, because then you're just paying attention to, if the lion is sneaking up on you.
Mm-hmm.
But in human spiritual quality of life terms, it means you miss the whole point of this. What I am as a nervous system is this interface between the truth and spirit of what I am and this extraordinary world that is another expression of the truth and spirit of what I am. And the whole point of life, as I understand it, is to connect those two experiences so that I am the process of that experiencing, becoming ever more full, ever more connected, and ever more at one with itself in all of its expressions. As long as the default mode network is online, that's really challenging to happen, because habit is extraordinarily powerful. But if you turn that mode off through psychedelics, or if you progressively learn the truth of yourself as something other than that whole system, then you begin to be able to take that system apart and begin to be able to be present to the world rather than to your anticipations of the world. And the next moment is taken for what it is, rather than in contradistinction to what it's supposed to be,
Yes.
or what it needs to be in order for me to be happy or safe or fulfilled.
Yes. And so somehow the repetition of a mantra helps to interrupt this default system.
The mantra works in two ways. The first is that, and the way that we repeat it is an absolute part of this, is, most meditation practices that are engaged in are a way of changing the way the mind thinks, the way it works. And that's still having an intellectual experience of the world. That's not going to do me any real good unless I have had this connective experience underlying that intellect. What the mantra does, though, is the mantra takes me out of the intellect being in charge or the ego being in charge. And the mantra itself, I allow it to be in charge in the following fashion. The mantra is given to me knowing that that mantra will be attractive to my mind. And so
How do you know
when
that? And I asked that
it's,
because like when you did the initiation with me, and I'm assuming with everybody in this lineage, you're given a specific mantra.
yes.
And so part of us wants to know, like, how do you decide?
And you didn't like yours.
No, my mom didn't like hers.
And because she had looked it up in the yoga
Yeah,
dictionary.
she did
And
that.
well, but this is a fascinating thing, because the word that she showed me
Yeah.
that she didn't like, which was good in the kitchen or something like that, it, it was not the mantra I gave her. She had taken the mantra and changed it
Okay.
to make it this other word, because it's like, because the ego wants to find what's safe, and what's safe is what has already happened. And so it turns it into something it already knows. But the mantra is, there are a couple of different characteristics that you study. And people who learn the technique, I tell them what those characteristics are.
Of picking a mantra for someone?
Of picking a mantra for someone. And I'm free to say that there are more than one and fewer than 100. One of my biggest fears was that when I learned the mantras, there'd only be one and I'd have to lie about it, but that's not the case.
So there's more than one. I know what mine is. I've never shared it with anybody. She didn't tell me what her word was, just that she felt disappointed because it seemed like it was mundane or something like that. And she wanted it to be something beautiful.
Yes. And I ended up, the next time I saw your mother, which was 2 or 3 years later, I gave her a different mantra because she was still disappointed with her original mantra.
Maybe the lesson is don't translate it.
Well, that's one of the lessons. And the fact is that the mantras are all bija mantras.
Seeds.
And bija seeds. So yes, they can mean various things, but as a seed, it means nothing. It's a meaningless sound, but the sound has two characteristics. And the first characteristic is that it will be attractive to my mind, so that I don't have to change my thinking. I don't have to try to stop my thinking. I just add one more little thought in there. And then that thought will be just a little more attractive than the other thoughts that have been swimming around in there since I can remember. And then the second characteristic of the mantra is that as I repeat it in this effortless fashion, it begins to settle down, it begins to be forgotten, it begins to disappear, and my mind, attracted to it, follows it as it settles down to an ever more subtle layer of thought. And this wave of activity that I am begins to de-excite, so that I begin to feel the underlying ocean of being that underlies all this thinking, feeling, active nature of what I am. What the Veda says about consciousness is that the one of the metaphors that can be used is the whole of consciousness is pure being, and that's like an ocean. And each of us is an individual wave of activity upon that ocean. But wave is never separate from ocean. Wave is simply excited ocean. If you can de-excite ocean, then you have being once again. And this is why it is said that what you're looking for is what you're looking with. And that truth is closer to me than my very breath. And all I need to do is to stop searching so desperately in order to find it, which is not to say you don't need to meditate. Because when I meditated for 20 years before I learned this practice. And when I closed my eyes and looked within without a legitimate practice, all I saw was a bunch of thinking. And it was not pleasant thinking. It was ugly thinking. It was bad,
So when you found your teacher and this Vedic practice, it shifted for you?
From the very first meditation, it did. Because for the first time ever, I had an experience of self that was absolutely knowable, and other than my thoughts and my feelings, my opinions and my ideas about myself or about the world.
Mm. Do you feel like some of that had to do with the fact that you were with them? Were you in their presence?
In the presence of the teacher?
Yeah.
Um, Possibly, because if consciousness is universal, then, and each of us is an individual expression of consciousness. If my consciousness is wide and clear and uplifted, and we step into each other's event horizon, then we're both going to be more clear and uplifted. Same thing. And so if to the extent that his consciousness was clear and uplifted, and to the extent that maybe that I was mesmerized by him or whatever, that's all part of it. However, the practice that is taught, you never have to see that teacher again.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you for 15 years.
Right.
And you still have your practice, and it's clearly it has expanded exponentially since we began. And it's become a part of your lifestyle and a part of who you know yourself to be.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Though we haven't seen each other in 15 years, every day I get your email.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love hearing
15
that.
years, and I reference it all of the time. I mean, over these years, as I've been a yoga teacher that whole time, I would so often turn to your daily emails for an inspiration for my class.
Love it.
One of the things I so appreciate about you is how you pull from so many different teachers in those writings that you send out, that it's so diverse and sits on a singular truth.
The truth is the truth, and it can be found in nearly every tradition. And I say nearly every because I'm not that widely studied that I know every tradition. But I was raised in the Western Christian Protestant tradition, and the words of the New Testament speak of the kingdom of heaven is within, and no man shall get to the Father except through me. But I don't read that as through Jesus, except through the self. You only find God here, then you can find it out there, but you've got to find it here first. And likewise, I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was, I can't remember what he was referencing, something and basically saying the same thing I said when I learned to meditate. It was like, why should I believe you? Because that's what I said to my teacher. I thought, when I'm going to pay you money, and I don't even know you, I'm supposed to trust you? Come on. And my friend was saying something, and I'd never done this before, but I just referenced the your creation story as it exists in Genesis, in the Torah and the Christian Bible, which is, there were the animals, and then there was human, man, woman. And the difference between man and woman is that they had dominion over the animals, which means they knew that they were alive. And the animals did not know that they were alive. They were simply alive. And then the one thing they weren't supposed to do was to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And good and evil, I don't know what it's translated from, but when they ate of that, suddenly it was no longer that they were conscious beings. They were now self-conscious beings, and they were pointed inward. And when you're pointed inward, you're subject to fear and separation and a deep longing to have that connectedness once again, to be at one with nature once again. And so from that, mythical beginning is the human condition, which is we're born and raised to know ourselves as incomplete and separate. And we're meant to struggle to find connection and value and worth. And the only way we can do that is by, instead of pointing within, beginning to point without. And the only way we can point without is getting grounded in that deepest truth of what we are, because from that deepest truth of what we are, the only direction is outward.
Yeah.
And this is what, love, wisdom, surrender, service.
Exactly.
But service can only occur if I'm being fulfilled within. And so the whole point of meditation and awareness of the self is that that's what fills me.
Yeah.
So that all of this then becomes play, the play and display of consciousness, rather than the grasping to fill this unfillable hole.
Exactly. I've said that so many times, and just rooted even further into those realizations as I've continued my practices, that when I do my spiritual practices, it only leads me to service, and it only leads me to a reconnection to nature and the world around me.
That's it.
That's it.
And that is the message of every legitimate spiritual religious teaching, is to, how do I find that connection to something greater than myself and find a way to offer of myself to the other aspects of that self.
Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting too with service, because then it doesn't feel like any kind of loss, like you might assume before you've gotten to that place, or hard work or a sacrifice. There's no sacrifice in the service.
Exactly. Yeah. I just recently learned something brand new about this, which kind of blew my mind. Because I recently had a win in my day job, and
can we say what that is? Can we say what your win is?
I won an Emmy Award for acting.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I was there's a psychiatrist I talk to twice a year, whether I need to or not. And he's the most brilliant man I know, and he's got a great sense of humor. And we just we have a half hour of fun twice a year. And I was, I was telling him about my experiences of just because there was all kinds of goofiness on the red carpet, and having this experience and having the experience without needing to win in order to feel happy, because I was happy as hell just being there. I literally was. Just as I would have been happy as hell being home. It didn't, because that's where I was at that moment. I found my way to that place, and we were laughing about it. And he says, "So, does this mean you get a couple of lifetimes off?" Because he knows that he's scientific and I'm spiritual, and we come to the same conclusions all the time. And I said, either that, or I'm, it's just making up for whatever the hell I was in the last life. And he said, "Oh, you're looking at it through the paradigm of conservation of matter." And I kind of went, "What?" And then I said, then I also recently have begun to remember that 40 years ago I was living in a car for a period of time, and I was working in a carnival, and I treated myself as if I were worthy of nothing, and now I'm worthy of an Emmy Award, and so I was going to ask him a question about about the expansion of our self-worth and our deserving power. And I started the question, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said, "Well, that you're still looking at it through that law of conservation of matter." I said, "Okay, what is that?" He says, "Okay, so look, let's say I have 10 marbles, and I give you 2 marbles. That means I've lost 2 marbles. You have the 2 marbles, so there's still 10 marbles, but you have more, I have less. So that's, matter is conservation. It will always conserve itself. And here in the relative world, there's exchange of, I pay you money, you teach me yoga. You pay me money, I cook you a meal, that sort of thing. And a lot of our love relationships are that way in nature as well, right? They're transactional. I'll love you for a while, then you've got to love me for a while. I'll be your fulfillment if you'll be my fulfillment. But he said ideas, and I read spirituality, spiritual truths, but ideas, he said, I can have a beautiful idea and I hand it to you. You now have the idea, but I do too. So in spiritual terms, there is no conservation. There is only expansion. And it's like, the Buddha said that, 1,000 candles can be lit from your candle and your candle is still lighted. I'm paraphrasing, but,
Exactly.
And this kind of just blew my mind because I've been looking for a way of my theory, my working theory.
Yes, let's hear
that we're in this body solely for the experience of knowing the absolute truth of our existence, even as we are embodied. That I am operating as a nervous system on the planet, but the truth of me is spirit. And the Veda would say that the whole of consciousness was one whole complete thing, and it became bored of its experience because it wasn't having an experience. If there's only one thing, there's no conversation to be had, there's no movement to take place, there's no passage of time. But it gave itself the first and initial, the initial and most valuable gift, which was the forgetting of its oneness with itself, in part, in order to have the supreme joy of coming back together with itself. So the whole of all of our problems, all of our issues, all of our challenges are opportunities to find our way through them as spirit rather than as, a never-ending set of problems to be solved that at some magical future, I'll finally find happiness. No, happiness here, regardless of what's happening.
I love the reframing of process, not problem.
Process, not problem.
Yeah. And that the process is built into the design of the human experience, that we're born knowing separation. And that's not an error. It's so that we can play the game of remembering. That's what the human experience is.
Absolutely.
And we can enjoy it.
Well, the Veda also says that heaven and hell are body-dependent phenomena, that they're not something that happens after I drop this body. Hell is where I was when I was spending time in my 63 Mercury down in Tucson, and sleeping on top of a reefer unit in New Orleans when I was in the carnival, and having the bottom of my feet smacked by the cops billy club for sleeping on a park bench, in Union Square Park. And the mindset of someone who would allow themselves to live in those conditions, or allow themselves only to have that much life. That's hell. And, at that time I used drugs and alcohol because to put something into my system that would make me feel different, I didn't care how different it was. Anything was better than where I was. And today, I live most of the time in heaven, which is what's going to happen next. Oh, that's okay. Here we go.
I just said that to a client this morning that I was speaking to, and she was saying, life is like 2D, and being on Earth, it's so dense, it's so heavy, it's so hard. And I said, well, some people feel like it's heaven on earth. Some people live like that.
Yeah. As we're all meant to live. That's the reason that it feels so good to see the world through those eyes is because that's life guiding us in the direction we're meant to be guided in. We're all yearning for that because that's how we're meant to be.
Do you feel like it's as simple as a meditation practice?
No, not at all. But I think a meditation practice is the thing that allows the field to be able to be changed. You know, to take a seminar on positive thinking or Kundalini or breathing or anything like that. Those are all fantastic tools. But if you don't have access to the depth of what you are, if you haven't broken through the seeming separation and shell, it's like throwing seeds on hard soil. They're not going to, if they do sprout, they're going to die immediately. There's going to be green for a moment, then it's gone before it ever gets ripe. You know, it's a farming metaphor. I grew up in Montana after all. But the meditation is what allows me to make that soil ready to take new seeds. It's what allows me to be open to change. Because the survival instinct in us is so strong, and almost all of us have been traumatized in some way, which has locked us into fight, flight, freeze, fawn reaction. And when you're stuck there, it's like, you know, good luck trying to change that. You can't. You simply can't until you find what's underneath that. And that begins to soften up the field in which those reactions are stored.
100%. 100%. And trust is a key part in it too. You can't trust if you're in a survival response, but you can if you're connected to the truth of your being.
Yeah. Even if you're still having the fear response in your system, if you've connected below that, underneath that system or beyond that system, you can begin to give yourself permission to step forward anyway.
Exactly.
And this is all the work that you do is about the same thing, though, isn't it? You're helping people find permission to be the truth of what they are.
Yeah, and through different gateways. I mean, for the longest time, it was yoga and meditation, and more recently with psychedelic therapy, and then with somatic experiencing, which is the healing of trauma through the body, and then coupling that with the spiritual practices or the psychedelic therapies. It's so beautiful and profound how it all works together, and I love witnessing the growth that I'm seeing with people, and just really teaching people in a similar way that maybe a meditation teacher would teach someone a practice. I find myself just teaching people how to regulate, just teaching people how to know themselves, teaching people how to know when they've gotten into that default mode. But then they also have the experience of what the ground of their being is through contrast. And so they can figure it out, how to get back to that. Maybe they have a meditation practice or a mantra or a deep breath or go on a walk, and kind of helping people reference too that they are the spirit in an animal body, and their animal body is having responses all the time, but that's not who they are.
Yeah. And to be able to remember that even when you don't have access to it, so that you can live through the extraordinary discomfort of being alive and in a fear response. And I include anger in that as well. Fear, anger, it's the survival response that so many of us are stuck in for decades. Some of us,
or the disconnection, the shutdown, the dissociation,
or that, like, what do you mean anger? I'm not angry. I'm not anything.
I'm not anything. Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, we'll go real
Well,
slow.
and when I offer people a moment of just, take a breath and scan your body and ask yourself where the place of strongest sensation is, or ask yourself where you're feeling a blankness.
Yeah.
Because that too there's where the gold is.
Mm.
And here's another thing that this just delights the hell out of me, just maybe perversely. But when I first began letting go of the limitations of my ideas about myself and the limitations of my worthiness to be on the planet, and started waking up a little bit, I found that it was just bloody uncomfortable to be in a body. Just supremely uncomfortable. And I wanted a cigarette. I wanted a pie. I wanted to make out with somebody. I wanted something to just push down the feeling. And, and Pema Chodron talks a lot about just leaning into the discomfort, which is a beautiful thing because it's, get used to it because it's going to be there. And here's what I realized, if I see myself as an ever expanding experience of consciousness, that means that I am, how big can consciousness get? Through my experience, consciousness is an infinite field. By definition, any point is the center of that field. So that means I am the center of consciousness, as are you, which of course means we're the same thing. But each of us is having our individual experience of that one thing. And so now, how big can my experience of that one thing get? How big am I willing to let it get? If life is about ever expanding my consciousness, and if expanding my consciousness is about ever moving into a new level of awareness and awareness of and presence to the relative world, every time I move into a newness of experience, by definition, it's uncomfortable. So what it means is, if I am engaged in spiritual growth, discomfort means I am moving in the right direction.
Oof, that's amazingly said. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
And it just takes the onus off of the whole thing. Discomfort only sucks when I think it's not supposed to be there.
Yeah. I often reframe it for folks that it's just unusual, that discomfort. It's like, of course it feels uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar to you so far.
Yes. And here's the next extrapolation from that. The willingness to sit and allow the unusual and sometimes extreme discomfort of being alive in stasis is the entry into the possibility of the joy of living when you put that in movement. You must have that level of sensitivity in order to experience the joy of living when you put it on the road, when you put yourself into the mode of service, when you allow yourself to be a channel for the flow of consciousness or the divine or life or nature or whatever you want to call it. And the more you allow that sensitivity to be there, that aliveness to be there in all of its discomfort, the more fully you can experience that joy of living when you are able to allow it to move through yourself.
Exactly. Another frame for it is just growth, right? Aliveness equals growth. Equals discomfort.
Yeah.
Discomfort.
Yes. Yeah, remember growing pains when you were a teenager, pre-adolescent, like, oh, what is this?
Your legs would ache. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same thing, except on a more subtle level, isn't it? I
Mm-hmm.
never thought of that. That's good.
Well, it's been for me such a treat to witness these past 15 years from afar, your growth as a teacher. The steady consistency that you provide in your emails that would go out, was it 5 times a week they have come? Or is it
It,
7 days a week?
it's 7 days a week.
Seven
Yeah.
days a week. Yeah.
Isn't
In
that
my
nuts?
Gmail, I probably have 6,000 emails in it. I bet 1,000 of them are Jeff Kober's. That I can't delete them. I can't delete them.
I love that.
But now you have a book out.
I have a book called Embracing Bliss, which is 108 daily meditations. So out of that, it's literally been, I think, 11 years now that I've done that. Sent out the daily thought. So I wintered it down to 108,
Wow.
And put out that book, and then I began a podcast. Uh, and actually, it's more than just the reading the daily thought. It's the thought, and me letting myself just talk about it as well.
Yeah, you just riff on it. I listened to some
Yeah.
this morning, and those are it feels like so long overdue. I mean, so many years I thought, oh, I can't wait for Jeff to finally put out a book of all of
Thank
these,
you.
because your writing is so just like you take another teacher's thoughts on spirituality or wisdom, and then you make it modern and accessible.
Well, here's a question for you, because the task I set for myself with these daily thoughts were, if someone takes the time and the effort to begin at the beginning and read it through to the end,
Mm-hmm.
they will feel better at the end than they did at the beginning.
Oh, yeah. And then you have a prompt at the end that's, today I will blank. And then there's one of your beautiful photographs.
Thank you. Yes. So here's what I've been noticing lately, is that there are spiritual teachers who talk about students must have a burning need for enlightenment, and I've heard a couple of people recently who just seem to be speaking from some morally superior ground, that if you don't have that burning need for enlightenment, you're not quite as good as someone who does have that. And I'm looking at and asking myself the question of, is there a line? Where is the line, or what is the progression from, how about just letting me make my life a little better? How about just learning how to live and love and be of service a little more? How about that as an end in and of itself, if that's where I happen to be as a spirit on the planet? And yes, of course, it's in service of enlightenment, because the whole of life is in service of enlightenment. But if someone is not knowingly or consciously aware of that or desirous of that, that doesn't make them any less of a seeker
Not at
than
all.
someone who is.
No.
But then, as a teacher, is it a different message to one person or the other based on that idea?
Well, I think you and I would probably both agree that it's probably in the paradox. It's in the both and somewhere. The answer
I
to
love
that.
you so much right now. That is such a beautiful answer. Oh my God, that just turned me on. I'm just alive right now. That blew my mind. That's fantastic.
Both are true. Both are true. Probably even whether or not we're conscious of it or not, we have the burning desire for enlightenment. It's just further in there. And then in the human
Yeah.
body, it's the full spectrum. It's the whole breadth of it all. And that's the purpose of it. Like you said, God consciousness is all one thing, and it chose to forget that. And so
Yeah.
if we were all the same, meaning the same burn for enlightenment, what fun is there with that?
Well, yeah, and the we all begin this whole thing at different, at different stages of our path,
Totally.
different stages of our growth, and there are now. So sidebar, you your mother didn't give you the middle name of Radha,
No,
did she?
Ram Dass did.
Ram Dass did. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I was going to ask you, does that do you are if this is not too personal a question, do you follow? Are you a Hindu? Do you identify as a Hindu, or do you see that as a referencing system? Or
Absolutely. I mean, I look up from like we're on the screen, and I look up above me and I see Lakshmi, I see Krishna and Radha, I see Hanuman, I see Maharaji, I see Ram Dass. I mean, I have Hindu deities all around me. And I've been
fantastic.
immersed in the teaching and lineage of yoga for half of my life.
Uh,
But I wouldn't say that I'm a Hindu,
okay, okay,
if
yeah,
that makes sense.
okay,
But I love that Ram Dass gave me that name because he's one of my teachers, one of my main teachers. And so I take that on. A lot of people just call me Radha, but I use,
really,
yeah.
that's beautiful.
I say I have Marissa Radha just because a lot of people still call me Marissa, and I don't want to confuse people or make it hard for anybody. So it's kind of like whatever you'd like.
You'll answer to anything
Yeah, I'll
because
answer
it's just
anything.
this passing anyway. Yeah.
And both have, for me, a beautiful energy. I love the energy
Hmm.
of Marissa and what that means. And I love the energy of Radha and who she is.
You seem to be much more Radha at this point than Marissa,
Yes.
though.
Yeah,
You were Marissa when I met you, but yeah,
exactly. So people from my
that's fine.
past will call me Marissa, or my
Uh-huh.
family who are from my past. But I'll introduce myself as Radha. And that, as we were speaking to earlier, is an uncomfortable growth edge for me.
To introduce yourself as
Yeah.
Radha.
Yeah. There's an
I'll
aliveness
bet.
and an unusual feeling to it. It's edgy. I'm on an edge when I do that.
And are you anticipating a certain kind of reaction, or
The reaction's usually, how do you say that? Rhonda?
wow? It's a beautiful. It's a beautiful deity,
Yeah.
Radha.
And most don't know who it is unless they're in a bhakti tradition or yogic tradition or Hindu tradition. They don't
Uh,
know that she is a deity.
and in his was Ramdas was he in the Vaishnavite tradition? Was he like a bhakti
Oh, he
uh,
was fully
yogi?
bhakti. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And he was given the name Ram Dass from his teacher,
right. Which was
Neem
Neem
Karoli
Karoli
Baba.
Baba. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And so for me, him telling me, giving me that name, one, just being able to spend time with him in person was like a boon. And then when he told me that my name was Radha without even me asking him was like another boon for myself. It felt like a treasure.
Did that guide you in the direction of your teaching, or was that a recognition of the teaching you were already guided toward,
Yeah.
or was it
The
once again
latter.
yes and?
Yeah. I haven't told many people this, but I'll tell you where, and then everybody else will hear it. My partner, well, he was with Ram Dass for a few days before I was with him. And he said to me, I'm going to ask Ram Dass to give me a name. And I said, amazing. You should do that. That's wonderful. And he said, what do you think it's going to be? And I said, I don't know, but I have a feeling it's just going to be one word. And he's really like, really? I'm like, yeah, that's just my intuition. And I thought to myself at that time, if he were to give me a name, I know he would tell me that my name is Radha. I knew it. And then when I was with him and my partner asked for his name and he said Krishna, which was just one word, and he was blown away. And I was just sitting there and witnessing and being with it all. And then he turned to me and I thought to myself, he's about to tell me my name is Radha. And then he did. He said, and you're Radha. And he just slapped his leg and started laughing and laughing like it was the funniest thing.
Oh my God. Well, and again, this is that the truth is the truth, and we resonate with it, and then we reflect it for each other. So he was reflecting the truth that you already knew within yourself, and
but
and
that
it
I
made
would
it more
never
real.
say. I would never.
No, you
have
would never.
said
No,
it.
no.
Yeah.
I was given the name Ram by my teacher, and it was so perfect because Ram was the first fully human avatar of Vishnu, and as such, he constantly forgot that he was God and would behave just extremely humanly, and then suddenly he'd be reminded, oh yeah, I'm above this, or I'm other than this, I'm more than this, and
it seems
I'm
to parallel your actor life.
what's that?
Your actor life that merges with where you can pretend like you're other people.
I'm sorry. Tell me more. What are you saying?
Well, as an actor, you're pretending that you're
my
other people.
afterlife. I thought you said my afterlife.
No, actor.
Oh my. Oh, well, then that's it. Let's look at that for a moment, because what actor life gives you is a framework within which to be fully yourself. You know, Meisner said that he was the acting tradition that I follow is, or that I learned from, is acting is behaving truthfully under imaginary circumstances. So, you know, if we're having this conversation with the relationship that we have with each other, if suddenly we were given the circumstances that you're my daughter, then it would be a different conversation. We'd be saying the same words, but there would be a different flow to it. There would be a different kind of give and take. There would be a different set of worries, a different set of needs. All those things would just come into existence because we've assumed this other relationship. And you know, acting is like, oh, okay, you're this guy and the other person is this guy, and now here's the words, go. And the point of it is to find full freedom as this other circumstance. And freedom can only exist within limitation. So you know, the limitation of this is your character. And if it says you kill this person, don't actually kill them because it's acting, you know, and those kinds of limitations, then you can allow yourself the full freedom to express. And it's kind of the single most powerful job I could have ever had, to practice spiritual principles, to practice the experience of freedom, to practice stepping beyond my fear, to practice unself-consciousness, to practice behaving without reference to whether you're going to approve of it or not. You know, which is not to say to practice without reference to your experience. It's actually the opposite. I'm paying attention to your experience rather than your experience of me. Or truthfully, my idea of your experience of me, because I can't know your experience of me, but I'm going to read different cues. So I was just having lunch with my wife, Adele, you remember.
Yeah,
and,
that was wonderful.
Yeah. And she picked up the hummus that was next to my plate, and she said, is it okay if I have this? I said, oh, why are you asking me that? It's the hummus. It's not my hummus. She said, oh, well, yeah. And I said, why would you ask me that question? And she said, well, you moved your shoulder. And I said, oh, that meant you shouldn't be taking my hummus. I didn't even, that wasn't even in my mind. I had a sore shoulder from working out this morning, but she read it as, oh, I'm taking his hummus. And, we're doing that all the time. We're reading reality from each other and amending our behavior to have a certain experience of each other.
Yeah, we're making assumptions and we're making it up. We're making things up all of the time. Most of it's made up. What we think is going on. So it was kind of great for her to clarify, She made the assumption.
It was beautiful.
He's upset about this hummus snatching. I should ask him.
The case of the missing hummus.
And then if you're sulky later tonight, she'll be like, I know I shouldn't have taken that hummus.
I shouldn't have taken his hummus.
But now she knows it's not it.
And then a week from now, it's like, it all started that day I took your hummus. You've been different since then.
Relationships too, such a beautiful ground to learn and grow in.
I had been a meditation teacher. I'd been doing this meditation for quite a long time before I suddenly realized, and this just shows I'm really ignorant some of the time. But I realized the relative world, they call it that because it's all about relationships. Everything is in relationship to something else. Our conversation is in relationship to when we met 15 years ago. It's in relationship to how we're going to feel after it's over. Our ideas are in relationship to the way they may have occurred yesterday as opposed to the way they'll occur tomorrow. And I'm in relationship to this chair. I'm in a relationship to you. It's all about relationships.
Referencing.
Referencing, comparing, contrasting. And then the spiritual work of that is to allow that, and it's, oh my God, this is why paradox and the capacity to hold it is such an important tool for spiritual growth, because it's the expansion of consciousness to allow all of the relationships to occur without letting any of them fall into the realm of judgment.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you just taught me something. That's fantastic.
They just are. It just is.
It just is. This is the way it is right now. That's beautiful.
It really, that brings me so just present, brings me so back to this present moment. I feel that alive in my body, just presence, when you can hold it all.
Yeah. And just let it be there. And it's like, if I have the idea that it should be other than the way it is, I have stuck a flag in the ground, and now I have to defend that flag. And sticking that flag in the ground might even be to my detriment. But if I'm behaving from fear, I'll stick flags in the ground to have a position.
Well, as soon as you've stuck the flag in the ground, you've come out of flow. You're no longer alive. You've become static.
Yeah.
And exactly, you're defending then that flag.
Yeah. And saying, this is enough for now. Really, it's an infinite universe. It's never enough for now. Doesn't mean don't rest, but don't let the rest be a stasis. Let it be a flow. The rest too can be a flow.
So many beautiful truths, Jeff. I just love it. And I'm so glad you've got your podcast going now, so I can tune in to you and hear your musings and your thoughts for the day regularly coming through, because so many are ingesting things now just through audio, and that you've made yourself available to so many more. I just hope that it grows and grows and grows.
Oh, back at you. And I'm going to start having like once a month interviewing someone and adding that into the podcast. So maybe you'll let me interview you
I'd be
so that
delighted.
I can shut up a little bit and let you talk a little more.
No, I'd be delighted for that. And are you still doing what's the word I want to use? Initiations into the meditation lineage?
I am. I have I gave a private intro talk this morning, and we'll be teaching someone shortly. And
Okay.
once a month, I do an introductory talk and teach the 4-day course. And yeah, it's it's just as long as it keeps happening, I'll keep doing it. What else are we here for? I, I'm sure that you have the same experience. It's like you do this because you clearly love doing it. You clearly are alive and in this experience of joy by having an interaction like this. And when you teach or when you guide someone in their therapy, I'm sure you're in the state of flow with that. And even if there are times when you don't want to engage in it, once you start doing it, it's like I'm sure you're thrilled beyond your ability to say that you're doing it.
Always.
And it's like we're given these extraordinary gifts of avenues within which to practice freedom, through which to practice flow. And teaching meditation is one of them for me. Acting is one of them for me. Taking photographs is, tintypes is one of those for me. And why would we ever stop?
You wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the life force is flowing to it and through it for you. And so if people want to find you for meditation, it's just jeffkober.com.
jeffkober.com, jeff-kober.com, Embracing Bliss Podcast on any podcast application, and Embracing Bliss, the book, on any Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Powell's Books, any of those.
Big successes for you this year. The book's out, the podcast has started, the Emmy has been won.
My son stopped by last night, and we were sitting and having a cup of tea late in the evening, and I said, "Turn around." He said, "I've already seen it," because I have it up on the mantle. And he couldn't help himself. He finally did turn around, look at it, and he said, "It looks a little out of place because it's on the mantle. We have Saraswati and Lakshmi and Parvati and all these different deities. Most of them, Shakti, Mother Divine." And he said, "It's kind of out of place." And Adele said, "That's Shakti. What are you talking about? That's another woman. She's holding up the world. What do you want?" And it's the same thing. Isn't that extraordinary?
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing the energy of flow.
Yeah.
And that's what the statue is. So.
It's fully Shakti. So right.
Fully Shakti. Yeah.
Beautiful.
We didn't even get into Shakti. I want to know what you know about that.
Well, let's do
next
more.
Time.
Yeah, next time.
Okay.
We'll do it again for sure. And just such a treat for me to reconnect to you again like this. I love it so much. And you've really been in my life every day with your emails and through my teachings and my own meditation practice. So thank you.
I honor you. The world to me. Thank you. Thank you. And thanks so much for this. Just a delight to talk to you.
Yes. Give Adele my best.
I certainly will.
Yeah. All right.